All right, so in this video, we're going to start talking about the next chapter in the book in time period 3. So this is going to be our start of chapter 14, which is about Islam. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the background, some of the necessary context you need to understand, and we're going to talk about the very beginnings of the religion. Just to note, remember, the textbook did switch chapters 13 and 14, so some of the supplemental materials you see about Islam on Canvas may be cited as chapter 13. Just make sure you're reading the thing. If you want to find information on Islam, just continue reading. If it says chapter 13, but it's about Islam, don't worry, it's still about Islam. Okay, so let's talk about where we're talking about first. So here's a map of the area. Most of what we're going to be dealing with is happening right in here on the Arabian Peninsula. So this city here is Mecca. This city up here is called Medina. They're about 150 miles apart. So this is where all of our action is going to be taking place today. Note that it is kind of outside of the regions we've been talking about. So Persia is up here, Egypt is over here, the Byzantine Empire, where the Roman Empire moved to, is up here. So this is kind of outside of the area that we've been looking at, and that's going to play into our story. So just to kind of give you an idea of where we're looking at, it's right in here. All right, so before we start talking about Islam, let's talk about the area in which Islam starts. So let's do a little bit of background on the Arabian Peninsula. So the Arabian Peninsula is home to modern-day Saudi Arabia, but also some of these smaller countries like Yemen, Oman, the United Arab Emirates. So this is the Arabian Peninsula, this whole thing. And Saudi Arabia is this kind of brown, tan-colored country right here. So little bit of background on the area. This is a desert, like for real desert here. So this is a real desert environment. It doesn't mean that it is empty of people. The native Arabians, the people who are from this area, are called Bedouins. And these are the native Arabians. These are the people who live in this area originally. The Bedouins are pastoral nomads. So they move around with herds of animals, probably goats, but also sheep, maybe horses. But those are probably the animals that they live with. Now, because this is a desert environment, these pastoral nomads are very jealous of the resources. So there are many conflicts over food and water for their animals. Because this is a desert, there's not a lot of food and water for the animals, so it's common to see groups of Bedouins get into conflicts over the lack of resources in a desert. But additionally, because it is a desert, hospitality is very important to the Bedouins. So not helping a person in need in a desert is bad. To the Bedouins, it's important, whether or not they're a rival, whether or not they're an enemy. If you find somebody who is caught in the desert, someone who doesn't have any water, doesn't have any food, it's really important that Bedouins give them hospitality. Because anybody could find themselves in this situation. So Bedouins are very aware of the lifeline that they can give people if they're stuck. And so hospitality and treating guests very well is a big part of Bedouin and Arabian society. So even though they might get into a lot of conflicts, at the end of the day, they do treat each other with a sense of like mutual humanity. The other important thing to note about this region is that it is an important intersection of trade routes. So it kind of sits on the Silk Road, and it's also adjacent to the African trade routes and the maritime trade routes in the Indian Ocean. So the Arabian Peninsula kind of sits on the intersection of all of these trade routes, which means, as we've mentioned several times before, that trade is essential for cultural diffusion. So what we're going to see is that this area is a real melting pot of lots of different cultural practices, especially religious practice. So this area is going to be a very rich religious and cultural environment. And especially once we get into the post-classical period, in the post-classical period, the wealth and stability of the Arabian Peninsula is attractive to merchants because like the Romans are gone and the Chinese are faltering. So the Romans and the Chinese are kind of wobbly at this point. And what they see in the Arabian Peninsula is stability. Things really haven't changed here. And so merchants are kind of attracted to this area because they know that they're relatively safe. So we're thinking kind of in here like maybe like the 500 CE, and that's kind of the time frame we're looking at here. Okay, so now let's start talking about the beginnings of the religion. So again, I'm going to give you my standard disclaimer for when we talk about religion. We're looking at the religion and the people therein as historical figures. So we're about to talk about Muhammad. Muhammad is, in this case, just a historical figure. We're going to look at Muhammad the same way that we would look at Jesus or Siddhartha Gautama or Lao Tzu, any other religious figures we're talking about. He's just a historical figure to us, and I'm going to treat him like a historical figure. The spiritual side of any of these religious figures is outside of our purview. So, with that being said, let's talk about Muhammad. So Muhammad was born in Mecca in the year 570 CE. So according to Islamic tradition, he was born in Mecca in 570 CE. So he was a member of the Quraysh clan, and it was their job, their clan's job was to kind of control the religious pilgrimage routes through the Arabian Peninsula. Like, that was their job. So a pilgrimage is basically just a religious trip. It's travel for religious purposes. And this clan, which Muhammad was born into, their job was to control the pilgrimage routes. Now, Muhammad's job was not really anything to do with this. Muhammad himself was a caravan merchant. So he didn't really have a lot to do with the whole religious pilgrimage stuff. He was a merchant. So that tells us two things. One is that he was pretty well accustomed to other religious traditions. So he would have dealt with merchants of other faiths. I'm sure that he, in his time, saw Christians and Jews and Buddhists. It wouldn't have been weird for him to encounter people of many different faiths, and he encountered them and traded with them. It also kind of tells us that he had some money. So Muhammad was noted as a spiritual man. He was a spiritual man, and when he wasn't trading, when he wasn't going on a trade trip, he would often pray or meditate in the caves outside Mecca, up in the mountains. And if you were to visit Mecca today, you could go see these caves. Now, while he was doing this, in the year 610 CE, according to Islamic tradition, Muhammad was visited by the angel Gabriel. And this is the same angel Gabriel that visits Mary in the Nativity story. It's the same Gabriel. And he was visited by Gabriel, who gives Muhammad the Quran, or the Word of God. Now, a couple of points about this. First, there's no correct way to spell this word, Quran, because it's written in a different alphabet. So we take the best Latin alphabet approximation of how to spell it, and we just go with it. So as long as I can tell you're saying Quran, you can spell it phonetically, you can spell it any way you want to, as long as it sounds like that word. This is the way your book uses to spell the word, so that's what I'm going to call it. Now, one more thing about God. So this God is the same God that Jews and Christians pray to. In fact, the only difference is that Muslims call God Allah, which is simply the Arabic word for God. So it's the same God. Jews, Christians, Muslims all pray to the same God. And the only difference is that Allah is the Arabic word for God. So when we say the word of God, or we say the word of Allah, we're saying the same thing. We're just using a different language's word. So in 610, Muhammad is visited by Gabriel, gives Muhammad the Quran, which is the word of God. This took 4 trips. So he's visited 4 times. So the resulting religion, which we will now start to call Islam, borrows from a lot of nearby religions. So there's definitely parts of Judaism, there's definitely some Christianity, there's some Zoroastrianism, and there is some like native Arabic spirituality in here too. So, like I said before, this area is a melting pot of different cultural practices, and Islam reflects that. It borrows pieces of Judaism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and the stuff that's already there, and what we get is Islam. Now, to continue Muhammad's story, Muhammad is quite understandably reluctant to tell people what happened. Completely understandable. He would think that people would think he was weird if he starts telling people that an angel came to visit him and gave him the word of God. So he's reluctant to tell people what happened, but eventually he tells his family and close friends. And these people become the first Muslims. Now, Muslim means one who submits to God. And Islam simply means submission to God. Basically, it's the idea that you acknowledge God is in charge, and a Muslim is one who acknowledges that. So we get a very small community of Muslims in Mecca. So this is kind of in the decade that follows. Now, like Jesus, Muhammad angered the political authorities for pretty much the same reason. Muhammad and Jesus both argue that there is only one true faith, and the current religious environment is wrong. So for Jesus, that was the idea that we should worship the Roman emperor as a god. We're not going to do that. There's only the one God, and he wants us to only worship him. For Muhammad, the religious environment, the current religious environment, was one in which all religions are tolerated and even promoted as a way to attract merchants. So remember, we want to make the merchants feel welcome so they come and trade and we can tax them. And so basically what happened in Mecca was that any and every religion was tolerated and encouraged because they wanted to make every merchant feel welcome. And Muhammad looks at this and says, no, 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 all of those other religions are incorrect. This is the one true faith. And what made matters worse was that Muhammad's family, so Muhammad's clan, was one group that stood to lose money if Muhammad's ideas spread wildly. Because remember, they're in charge of this religious pilgrimage trade. And if Muhammad suddenly shuts that down, if enough of Muhammad's followers shut that down, then Muhammad's clan would lose money. And so, again, like Jesus, the religious authorities, or the authorities, they attempt to kill Muhammad. And so that happens in the year 622. So they attempt to kill Muhammad, but Muhammad escapes and goes to the nearby city of Medina, where he waits for 10 years. this event is so important to Islamic history that this is where the Islamic calendar starts. So the Islamic religious calendar starts at the year 622. So on the Islamic religious calendar, that's year 1. So in 622, or year 1 on the Islamic calendar, Muhammad escapes his assassination attempt and he goes to Medina and he waits for 10 years, gathering followers and building an army. Remember, the people who live in this environment are used to these kinds of conflicts. So it's not weird that there would be conflicts over this stuff. This is an area in which resources are scarce, which leads to a lot of conflict. So this isn't necessarily that weird of a thing. So in the year 630, Muhammad comes back and he conquers Mecca. And they adopt Islam. And get rid of all the other religious items. So they get rid of all the other religious stuff. Mecca now adopts Islam because Muhammad comes in and conquers the city. They get rid of all the other religious stuff, and now Mecca is an Islamic city. Unfortunately, soon after this, Muhammad dies in the year 632. And that is where we will pick the story up in our next video, looking at what are the basic beliefs of Islam, like how we looked at the basic beliefs of Christianity or Buddhism. So what are the basic ideas of Islam that Muhammad created? And then we'll talk about what happens in the Arabian Peninsula after Muhammad's death. So that'll be our next video. Until then, this is Mr. Nissen signing off.